The dinner table was set the same way it always was when my father was home, silver polished. Wine breathing, the air heavy with the kind of silence that only people who don't trust each other can share. Except he wasn't home anymore. It was just her and me. Evelyn, my stepmother. The woman who married my father after my mother's accident. The woman who called me son but never quite looked me in the eye when she said it. She'd made roast chicken, the same meal she cooked the night my father died. Eat, she said softly. I didn't move. She smiled, that same polite smile she wore at the funeral, the one that didn't reach her eyes. You look so much like him when you're angry. I'm not angry. Then what are you? I stared at her hand resting on the tablecloth. The thin gold wedding band still glinting under the light. Curious. About? What you told the police. Her fingers twitched once before she stilled them. That it was an accident. Which it was. He fell down the stairs, you said. Yes. Backwards. Yes. And broke his neck. She nodded, slow, measured. You make it sound cruel when it was only clumsy. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Funny, though. The coroner said the bruises on his wrists looked like fingerprints. The knife in her hand stopped halfway through the chicken. For a second, neither of us breathed. Then she said, You think I killed your father? I said nothing. Her eyes softened. You don't have to be afraid of the truth, Adam. It already happened. Later that night, I found her in the study. She was sitting in his chair, smoking. My father's lighter, engraved with his initials, gleamed between her fingers. You shouldn't smoke in here, I said. Your father used to tell me the same thing. She exhaled slowly, the smoke curling around her like a ghost she was on familiar terms with. I know you don't believe me, she said. But he wasn't the man you think he was. And what was he? She smiled faintly. A coward who mistook fear for love. I didn't know what to say. She gestured toward the desk drawer. You should look. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each addressed to E in my father's handwriting. The first began. I can't sleep without seeing her face. I wish she'd never known about us. The last one ended. If she tells Adam, everything's over. When I looked up, she was watching me. You understand now, she said. He wasn't worth saving. I swallowed hard. And you? Her voice softened. I was never trying to save him. The next morning, I went to the police station. I told them I wanted to reopen the investigation. They took my statement, thanked me, promised to look into it. When I got home, she was waiting. You think justice will help, she said quietly. It won't. It only feeds the same hunger he had. What hunger? She smiled. The one for power. I don't want power, I said. I want the truth. No, Adam, she whispered. You want blood. She reached across the table again, the same gesture as before, slow, almost tender. You don't have to take it. You just have to know that you already have it. I didn't move. I couldn't. Her fingers hovered above mine, trembling slightly. He hit me, she said suddenly. Not at first. Not when you were watching. But later. After. When he thought I couldn't leave. The words hung in the air like smoke. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked. Because no one believes a woman who stays, she said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the sound of her voice. The calm way she said it already happened. So I went back to the study. The smell of her cigarettes still lingered. Inside the drawer where I'd found the letters, there was something new, a photograph. My father, smiling, one arm around Evelyn, the other around my mother. On the back, written in her handwriting. We all played our parts too well. The next morning, she was gone. The car, the clothes, everything. No note. No forwarding address. I thought that was the end of it until a week later, when I got a call from the police. They'd found her. Her car had gone off the same cliff where my mother's had years before. The officer said it looked like an accident. I didn't argue. Now I eat alone at that same table. Her chair sits empty across from mine. The light hits the spot where her hand once rested, and I still see her there sometimes, calm. Steady, almost forgiving. I pour 2 glasses of wine out of habit. Hers always stays full. And though I never took her hand, sometimes I still feel it on mine. Cold, gentle, unfinished. I buried my father's letters behind the shed 3 days after her car was found. I told myself it was to keep the past from festering, but maybe it was just to keep her voice quiet. For a while, it worked. The house stayed silent, the air still. I tried to live as if she hadn't once sat across from me at that table. Her hand hovering inches from mine, waiting for something I never gave her. But grief doesn't vanish when you look away. It hides in familiar sounds. The kettle whistling, the creak of the stair, the whisper of fabric against wood. And sometimes, late at night, I'd hear the softest tap, 3 times, on the dining table. The same rhythm her fingers made when she thought. They said the crash killed her instantly. They said she'd been sober. No sign of struggle. No skid marks. But I remembered her last words, "We all played our parts too well." It sounded less like regret and more like instruction. So I started digging again. Her name before she married my father was Evelyn Hart. I found the record in a courthouse 2 towns over. No priors, no debt, no living family. Just one police report from nearly 15 years ago, filed under her maiden name. Domestic disturbance. Filed, then withdrawn 2 days later. The name of the man she accused? My father. The next day, I went to the lake. The water was calm, pale green under the morning sky. I could almost hear her voice in the wind. The way she used to hum while cooking, low and steady, never finishing the tune. I threw a stone into the water. The ripples spread. Perfect circles widening until they vanished. And for a moment, I understood why she'd stayed so long. You can survive almost anything if you make it look like devotion. That night, I dreamed about the dinner table again. She was sitting across from me, the candles flickering between us. She didn't look angry, just tired. "I didn't mean for you to hate him," she said. "You killed him." Her head tilted. "Maybe, but only because he killed me first. You're not real." "Neither was our marriage," she whispered. "But the bruises were." She reached her hand across the table again, palm up this time. "Take it." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But when I looked down, I saw my father's ring glinting on her finger, the same one that had been buried with him. I woke before I could touch her. In the morning, I found something waiting on the kitchen counter. A napkin. Folded neatly. Written on it, in her handwriting. "Forgive me for not saving you sooner." The air smelled faintly of her perfume, jasmine and smoke. The coffee pot was still warm. I stood there for a long time, staring at the note, trying to decide if it was madness or mercy that kept her close. By evening, I made a choice. I set the table for 2. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 1 bottle of wine. I filled hers first, like I always used to. Then I sat. Waited. The air hummed with quiet. And in that silence, I finally said it out loud, "I believe you." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the candle flickered, once, twice. The scent of jasmine thickened. And somewhere just out of sight, her voice, faint but unmistakable, broke through the dark. That's all I ever wanted. The candle went out. But the room stayed warm. For weeks after that night, I left her place setting on the table. I didn't mean to, it just felt wrong to take it away. Like disturbing something that still breathed. Every morning I'd pass by, glance at the untouched wine glass, and almost hear her chair creak as if she were about to sit down again. I kept telling myself it was guilt, nothing more. But guilt doesn't hum old songs when you walk into a room. It doesn't open drawers you know you closed. And it doesn't whisper your name the way she did. The police called again. They'd finished the investigation. It was an accident, the officer said. We're closing the case. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Accident. That word again. The same one that had followed every tragedy in this family. My mother's death, my father's fall, Evelyn's crash. Every wound labeled by the same lie. But I couldn't stop wondering why she'd written "Forgive me for not saving you sooner." Who had she been trying to save? Me, or herself? That night I went into her room for the first time since she died. It still smelled faintly of perfume and cigarettes. The curtains were drawn tight, the dresser neatly arranged, except for one drawer that wouldn't close all the way. Inside, I found a box. Small, heavy, locked. I used a knife to pry it open. Inside were photos, dozens of them, some so old the edges had turned yellow. My mother, smiling. My father beside her, and Evelyn, always in the background, watching. In one picture, taken years before the wedding, my father's hand rested on her shoulder. Intimate, possessive. There was a note folded between two photos. The ink had bled, but I could still make out the words. He promised she'd never know. I flipped it over. On the back, in faint pencil, another line written in Evelyn's hand. But she always knew. The house creaked as I left her room. The floorboards gave a low sigh under my weight, as though the walls themselves were tired of holding secrets. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the front door was open. The night outside was still, the air heavy with the smell of rain. On the porch, resting on the table beside the dead flowers, was another photograph. It hadn't been there before. This one was newer, my father, Evelyn, and me. I was 10, caught mid-laugh, the kind of smile that belongs only to people who haven't yet learned the cost of love. Scrawled across the bottom in my father's handwriting. My perfect family. The ink was smeared, as though someone had tried to rub the words away. The wind picked up, rattling the trees. Somewhere behind me, I heard the faint sound of a chair moving. I turned. The dining room light was on. 2 glasses of wine, 2 plates, the candle burning low between them. And in the chair across from mine, her seat, someone sat. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew the shape of her hands, the slope of her shoulders. She reached across the table, palm up, just like before. Why? I asked. My voice shook. Why all of this? Because truth doesn't stay buried, she said. Her voice was soft, echoing, distant. It waits. And it rots. Her hand trembled slightly. He made me promise I'd keep you safe from him. I just didn't know I'd have to keep you safe from what came after. What came after? Her head tilted, and her voice lowered to a whisper. You. The candle flickered. The flame stretched tall, then vanished. When the light returned, she was gone. But her wine glass was empty. And the ring she'd worn, the one that had always caught the light, lay in the center of her plate. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, staring at the circle of gold until the sun began to rise. For the first time, I understood that forgiveness wasn't the end of her story. It was the trap she'd built so I'd never stop reaching across the table. After that night, I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, sitting across from me at that table. Her hand reaching out, her eyes waiting for something I couldn't give. The ring still lay where she'd left it. The faint smell of jasmine clinging to the air like smoke that refused to rise. I started hearing things again. A door shutting somewhere upstairs. A whisper that might have been wind, except it knew my name. The house was restless. Or maybe I was. I tried getting rid of the ring once. I carried it to the lake, stood at the edge, and threw it as far as I could. I waited for the sound of it hitting the water. There was none. Just silence, too clean, too final. When I came home, the ring was back on the table. Not wet, not dirty, just waiting. That's when I decided to go through everything she'd left behind, one last time. The papers, the photographs, even the burned letters I'd buried. I needed to understand what she wanted from me, why she wouldn't let go. I found the answer hidden in the back of the drawer, behind old receipts and jewelry boxes. A cassette tape, no label. I hesitated, then put it in the old player that still sat in my father's study. For a long time, there was only static. Then her voice. If you're hearing this, Adam, it means I couldn't reach you the way I wanted. I'm sorry. You were never supposed to see what he made of us. Her breath hitched, the sound raw and human. Your mother didn't die in that car accident. He made it look that way. She found out about us, about everything, and he couldn't stand the thought of her leaving. I stayed because I thought I could keep you safe. I stayed because I believed in redemption. A pause. But he didn't stop with her. The tape clicked, then silence again. And then, a voice I hadn't expected. My father's. You'll tell him what you want, Evelyn. You'll make yourself the victim. But he'll see through it. He's my son. Her voice came back, shaking. He's nothing like you. The tape ended there, the machine whirring empty. I sat in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the player until it stopped. The air felt heavier now, the house smaller. My father had always said the dead couldn't hurt you. But he was wrong. The dead don't hurt you, they live through you, until you become the next version of their story. The next morning, I went back to the lake. It was colder than before, though the trees were full and green. I walked to the edge and stood there, waiting for something I couldn't name. The water was still. In the reflection, I saw her again. Not the haunted version from the house, not the woman bound by secrets and guilt. She looked younger, lighter, almost at peace. Why can't you leave me? I whispered. Her reflection smiled faintly. Because you still think I need forgiveness. The ripples spread, and she was gone. When I returned home, the ring was no longer on the table. The chair she'd sat in was pushed back slightly, like someone had just stood up. The air smelled clean, untouched. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel expectant. It felt finished. I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. The memory of her hand reaching across the table played behind my eyes again. But this time I saw what I'd missed before, how she never expected me to take it. It wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. She hadn't been asking for forgiveness. She'd been giving me permission. To let go. To leave the table. To finally stop being her unfinished story. When the sun came up, I took the last of the letters and the tape and set them on fire in the Backyard. The smoke rose fast, curling into the pale morning sky. And as it faded, I realized that the voice in my head was silent at last. Not because she was gone, but because she'd finally been heard. The house is quiet now. Not peaceful, just empty. Like a stage after the audience has left and the actors have taken their final bows. I don't open the curtains anymore. Light makes the dust too visible. It reminds me of her, how she used to wipe down every surface until her reflection gleamed back at her. The table still sits in the middle of the room, though I've stopped setting it for two. The ring is gone. The tape burned with the rest. But sometimes, when the sunlight hits just right, I can see a faint outline on the tablecloth where her hand once rested, like heat that never cooled. I tell myself I'm done searching for ghosts. But ghosts aren't something you find. They're what remains after you've stopped pretending nothing ever happened. A week ago, I got a letter. No return address, no postmark, just my name. Written in looping script that looked too familiar to be real. Inside was a photograph, the three of us again. My father, Evelyn, and me. But this time, there was something new. Someone had drawn a red circle around my hand. On the back. You finally took it. My breath caught. I hadn't, not once. I'd left her hand hanging there, night after night. Unless I had, and just didn't remember when. That night, I dreamed of her again. We were back at the table. The room was darker than before, the walls faintly breathing. The air smelled of smoke and jasmine. She sat across from me, her eyes softer now, her skin pale as candle wax. Between us, the ring glinted faintly. You came back, she said. I never left. Her mouth curved, but not into a smile. You always were your father's son. I felt anger rise, hot and helpless. You said I wasn't like him. You wanted to believe that, she said. So did I. What does that mean? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. It means you already know how it ends. I looked down, and my hand was covering hers. I hadn't moved it, but it was there, fingers intertwined, skin cold as stone. When I looked up again, her face had changed. Not older, not younger, just closer to mine. And then I realized the truth, her features weren't fading. They were blending with mine. I woke with my hand numb, pressed flat against the table beside the empty chair. The air felt thick, heavy, charged. I stood, heart pounding, and caught my reflection in the window. For a split second, it wasn't me. It was her. The same steady eyes. The same quiet defiance. And she was smiling. I left the house that morning. Locked the door, pocketed the key, and started walking. I didn't know where I was going, only that the farther I got, the lighter I felt. At the edge of town, I stopped by the river. The water was high, fast, reflecting the clouds like shattered glass. I threw the key in, watched it vanish. Maybe that was all she'd ever wanted, for someone else to carry the truth far enough that she could finally let go. When I returned home that night, the house felt different. The air was still, the shadows steady. I sat at the table one last time, tracing the spot where her hand had once reached for mine. I took it, I said quietly. You can rest now. No reply, no flicker of light, just silence, clean, unbroken. But as I stood to leave, the wine glass on her side of the table tipped slightly, catching the light before settling again. It was enough. Sometimes I catch my reflection in passing, a window, a mirror, a puddle after rain, and I swear I see a shadow of her there, standing just behind me. Not haunting, not warning, just watching. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not forgetting, not release, just the quiet act of seeing someone, finally, for who they were and who they couldn't be. The table is empty now. The house breathes again. And in the stillness, I realize, I did take her hand. Not to hold on, but to let her go. The house is sold now. The last of the furniture went yesterday. And what's left behind is only the echo of footsteps and the faint smell of her perfume still caught in the wood. I stood in the doorway this morning, the key cold in my hand, knowing I'd never walk back through it again. It's strange how quiet endings can be. No thunder, no closing act, just a breath that finally exhales after years of holding itself in. I thought it would hurt to leave. Instead, it feels like something loosening in my chest. Like the weight of her silence has finally found a place to rest. I've kept only one thing, the chair she used to sit in at the dining table. It's old, cracked along one leg, but when I run my hand over the armrest, the wood feels warm. I placed it by the window in my new apartment. Morning light falls across it the same way it used to at dinner, soft and slanting. And I imagine her there sometimes, watching, but not asking anything of me. It doesn't feel like haunting anymore. It feels like memory, cleaned of its sharp edges. I never told anyone the full story, not about the fire, or my father, or what Evelyn confessed before she died. Some truths don't need to be spoken to survive, they live in what we choose to do next. I went back to school. Started teaching again. My students ask why I wear a gold ring on a chain around my neck instead of my finger. I tell them it belonged to someone who taught me what it means to let go. Sometimes they ask if it's from a woman I loved. I tell them yes, and I mean it. One evening, while grading papers, I caught a familiar scent drifting through the open window, jasmine and smoke, faint as a sigh. For a second, I froze. Then I smiled. "Hello, Evelyn," I said into the air. No voice answered, no whisper, no ghostly chill. Just the steady hum of life outside, people laughing somewhere down the street. And in that absence, I realized she wasn't gone. She was simply quiet. A few days later, I returned to the lake for the first time since the fire. The trees had grown thick around the shoreline, their reflections soft on the water. I walked to the same spot where I'd thrown the ring, knelt, and pressed my palm against the damp earth. The water was still. "Thank you," I whispered. Not for saving me, not for haunting me, but for staying long enough to make sure I learned how to listen. On the drive home, the sky turned the color of ashes just before sunset. For a moment, it looked exactly like the world I'd known before everything burned. But this time, it wasn't terrifying. It was beautiful. Because I understood now, every story ends twice, once when it's told, and again when you finally stop needing to hear it. I don't need her voice anymore. I carry it. When I speak kindly, when I forgive slowly, when I choose to stay silent instead of strike back. That's how she lives now, not in echoes but in restraint. I set her chair by the window every morning and watch the light fill it until it glows. It looks empty to anyone else but to me. It's the most honest thing I own, a reminder that love doesn't vanish when it ends. It just changes shape. The last time I looked, the glass of the window caught my reflection beside the chair, two silhouettes, side by side. And for once, it didn't scare me. Because I wasn't seeing a ghost anymore. I was seeing the part of her that finally became mine.